Meeting will now come to order, and I will read the EPSB mission statements. The Education Professional Standards Board, in full collaboration and cooperation with its education partners, promotes high levels of student achievement by establishing and enforcing rigorous professional standards for preparation, certification, and responsible and ethical behavior of all professional educators in Kentucky. Serving as board secretary is Sharon Jesser. Ms. Jesser, please call the roll.
Amanda Ellis, Susan Reber, Diane Berry, present. Elijah Edwards,
Present.
DJ Pryor,
Present.
Gunn, present.
Priscilla Keller, present.
Amy Lingo, present.
Jacqueline
Mayfield, present.
Bryn Murphy,
present.
Meredith Clinton, present. Lisa Brzezinski,
Present.
Amber Snell,
Present.
Vice Chair Weedman,
Present.
Chair Mitchell.
Justin Mitchell, present.
We have quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Jesser. Has anyone signed up for open speak? All right. Well, this morning, Byron Darnell joins us on behalf of the commissioner class. Welcome, Dr. Darnell.
Morning, everyone. It's great to see you all. And most importantly, I hope everything has gone as smoothly as the start of the school year can start. There's always something that's going to happen, but I hope for the most part, you all are enjoying being back in your districts, in your schools, supporting all of the amazing students that are entering the buildings every day. And just an extra thought out to our JCPS friends for today. Looking forward and just keeping that positive energy forward movement going on. It's obviously great to be here with you all, especially to be here in person. As you know, we also have a simultaneous meeting going this morning. So the Kentucky Board of Education has a special call meeting that is going now. So there are matters of business that they are attending to, and I'm sure everyone is probably pretty aware. So just something to keep tabs on as that process sort of begins. The commissioner will be leaving his post on September 29th. So there's a lot to figure out between now and then. I believe the agenda primarily revolves around the RFP process for the national search. And I think that is the only point of business that they have on the agenda. So certainly we have a lot to kind of anticipate and wait for, as it will certainly impact the roles that we play. But just a little note of that being in the queue this morning as well. I think we have Susan Reber, I believe, is ill today, and I think Dr. Amanda Ellis had last minute call away. So I think there's information that will be provided for you all in with regard to their report. I would love to just take a minute just to highlight a few things from OELE's end primarily. And the first thing to reference is a draft form of an annual report that you all received. And I'm sure just with all of your spare time, it's just, let's dig right in. I tried to make it informational, but not just overwhelming in terms of pages. It's kind of hard to condense down when you think, well, everything that you all do is important, and everything that OELE does is important. But I just tried to encapsulate sort of moments in time of particularly the movement and all of the decisions that you all have made across kind of hedging on the last 3 years, since it's been a little bit of a window, and it's continuing. But I hope it provides just sort of a moment to distill a lot of things that have come before the board and will involve OELE. So I will leave that in your hands, and I invite any feedback as well. I just mainly want to provide information that's pertinent to you all, useful to you all. And so that sometimes is hard to tell, do I want more, do I want less? But please let me know if you have any questions or anything on there. I'm more than glad to engage in any conversation around that. Just want to make sure there's not any questions or anything about the report. Okay, outstanding. So I'll leave that in your hands. And again, consider it a draft as well. So it's just something to get started from that you all can provide me a little feedback in terms of the information that you would like to see added and or perhaps focus on different areas. As far as our OELE work goes, I want to highlight some of the Go Teach KY efforts that are in constant motion here. And before that, I don't want to reveal anyone's too much personal, but I do want to think of Dr. Vita Stewart. Her family suffered an unexpected loss. And so just want to recognize her in this moment and her family as they navigate this difficult time for them. On a positive side, with the Educators Rising, we've certainly talked about that quite a bit, as we should, but we had 2 Grand Champion Awards, 5 second place awards, 4 third place awards, 17 semifinalists, 5 scholarship winners, 9 Honor Society inductees, 1 Educators Rising Champion Teacher Leader Award, and 1 chapter winning the Spirit Award spells a banner year for Educators Rising Kentucky at the Educators Rising National Conference that was held in July in Orlando. And our own Mr. John Pace is sort of leading out of the tunnel with these fine individuals and those that support them. This year, there were 129 students from Kentucky at the national conference, and there were 1,864 aspiring educators from around the country to compete. So in looking at the results from Kentucky, that is awfully impressive. And so we just continue to do all we can to support the impact that this particular movement is having. And I'm just very pleased to say that it continues to gain traction. And I'm so thankful for all of the work behind the scenes that is ensuring that our districts have this opportunity should they want to take advantage of it. More and more. Then on June 15th, we celebrated the past year's ambassadors by hosting a luncheon for those that could come. Summertime's it's me time as it should be, but we had several that were able to come here this hour, and we were just taking a moment to honor them. And it was exciting to have them and thank them for serving this past year in that role. And on top of that, we have the 2023-24 Go Teach KY Ambassador application. It went live on August 15th. Each year, we have more and more applicants. The goal is kind of like the Teacher of the Year. We would love to have an applicant from every district if we could. It makes it hard on the selection end, but that's what we want. So it is at least a formal opportunity to have a leadership role at the state level, be involved in conversations, and have an opportunity to insert teacher voice. And we know that it cannot be said enough how important that is in terms of sort of the, all of the things policy level that take place here within KD. So if you have anyone that you feel might be a wonderful advocate for that, give them a little nudge, and all that is on goteachky.com. Then we certainly see just the continued promotion of the profession via social media and through publications. You can never communicate enough, I feel, and so it's just a continued effort to make sure that it's consistent and out there in all the channels that we have available to us. Then turn to certification. I just want to always, of course, give credit to individuals that work very diligently to make sure educators get renewals, they get initials, and they get any questions that are answered. And the certification staff are just second to none in terms of their customer service. We are now well into the KEX platform, the Educator Credentialing System, and it has made a significant improvement in workflow. Just cannot say this enough. So just as a reference, this time last year, August 2022, there were 7,064 applications processed. These were the ones that were approved in last August. And then this August, there were 3,597. And the reason being is we've seen a more consistent trend as a result of the system doing what it's designed to do. We saw a greater uptick as a result of the system being able to send out communication and reminders. And so the workflow has evened out more. Usually by the July and August, it is not the most relaxing time for those working in certification. And I'm not going to say that it ever is relaxing. I should probably watch my words on that. They might come after me. But I think it's been more moderate in terms of their ability to process what, can sometimes be a frustrating situation if things get delayed. And they're doing day of. We've been on, or the division rather, has been on day of now for quite some time over the summer. And unless there is an incomplete aspect of the application or it needs to be reviewed, then things are going through day one, and people typically will get their certification back in a day, 2 days at most. So I just want to report that this process is beginning to reap the benefits that we had hoped, and extremely proud of all the work that everyone has put in to make sure this transition has gone well. Also on that, we'll see here in just a little bit, but Brandon has worked on the migrating of KFETs into the modern platform, and he has worked diligently to try to improve the process for the cooperating teacher aspects for both the district and individual end as well as the EPP end. And of course, while nothing is perfect, he has done a fantastic job of just informing and thinking about ways that this process can go more smoothly, if you will. So very excited that is now live and in play, and with his talent, he'll be the perfect person to make sure when suggestions come in, we can take it back to the vendor and see if we can make sure we don't have any of these glitches. So this was also presented at the CACT annual meeting this summer as well. So several individuals from OELE were able to attend, and gratefully, we had an opportunity as well to speak and answer some questions and have some dialogue. So very thankful for that also. As you know, the House Bill 319, the exit survey was part of that. The exit survey has been live now since approximately the end of July. And this is essentially a district is required to send the exit survey to an employee that is leaving the district voluntarily. And I do have to give a shout out to Justin Edwards for all of his work in terms of getting this exit survey live, providing more functionality than say just a Google form. It's more elaborate than that, and that is thanks to his ability to put this together. The goal was to meet the expectations in the statute, but also not make it anything too difficult. So we tried to find that niche of something that is fairly simple, but also gives hopefully some useful feedback. I can say that unfortunately, I wish that we had 0 surveys coming in. But the exit surveys have come in, not in abundance, mind you. Approximately 33 have come in since it's gone live. Again, I wish that were 0, but so it is out there and it is being used. The goal for the feedback loop with this is that Justin is also kind of working on a statewide representation. So just to aggregate the data that comes in. So there's more of a dashboard, if you will, to just have some high overview results from all of the surveys. And then as far as the individual districts go, we will send back their particular feedback twice a year. So we'll do it in December and June so that districts are receiving the information back pertinent to their particular individuals. So happy to report back. And then on another note, talked quite a bit just about the difficulty of navigating the educator workforce and kind of knowing the big question: how many do we need? How many positions are out there that are unfilled? And it really is a nuanced set of data that sort of compiles that information. And it's not the easiest to just come up with a finite number, just simply because we at the state level and then the platforms that districts use at the local level. So something that I've talked to you all about is just a pet project, if you will, or something to be able to pull these different streams of data together into one place. So you can go and find a lot of this information, but you have it. Most of you all are probably familiar with Infinite Campus, and it has been known as Infinite Clicks. Just, it takes a long time. You got to go through. There are a lot of things you have to click on, so you have to be very patient. You have to go, and finding this data can be like that too. And just frankly, people get a little frustrated because they don't want to spend all their time going through different links and so forth. So we have a draft version of this educator workforce dashboard, and it is getting closer and closer to something that hopefully can be useful. It is not perfect in any way. I don't think there is anything perfect, but it does pull all of these pieces of data into one place. And it's designed yearly, and then it's designed in a 5-year trend line. So you can look at it from both angles. And I'm excited because at least it is one place for a great deal of information that we have lots of conversations with. Again, it will not be the perfect metric in terms of knowing exactly how many teachers we need or how many vacancies we have, but it does get us in the right direction. And hopefully the ideal outcome will be that it makes sense. So plenty of action taking place. And as always, your support is so important to each and every one of us. And it would take me too long, but again, just thankful for very talented individuals that make all this happen. I just always will say that I'm very fortunate to work with very capable and talented people that make all this work, and that's often unsung. And so all of what I'm reporting is a result of other people working very hard for both EPSB, OELE, but more importantly, the students and our educators out within our districts across Kentucky. So thank you all very much. And I know we need to watch our time a little bit, but I appreciate the opportunity to just give you a little reflection.
Thank you so much. This time I report, you can probably guess what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to at least mention K-TIP and its importance to the state of Kentucky and our educators. I know we're still in the works of looking at that, revamping that, advocating for that being fully funded in the General Assembly. That was one of the priorities that KDE also put out there as one of the funded things. And so I know we're pushing for that. The Cassie Trueblood, she presented at the Commonwealth Education Continuum about all of the options that we have in Kentucky and all of the routes, as well as talking about K-TIP. And so I think that was well received, and hopefully we'll get some momentum going with that here at the beginning of the year. So fingers crossed on that. And then just personal shout out to our Simpson County Educator Rising group. I would be silly not to mention those. So I'm very proud of those students. All right. At this time, we will move to consent items. Items A through T are listed on the agenda as consent items, and I will give the members a moment to review that list. Does anyone wish to remove any of the items from the consent agenda for further discussion? Having received no request to remove items from the consent agenda, can I have a motion to approve consent items A through T?
I make the motion to approve consent items A through T.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Snell. The motion before the board is to approve consent items A through T. All in favor, say aye. All those opposed, say nay. And the motion passes. At this time, we will be moving on to information and discussion items with Dr. Darnell.
The overview of the student teaching requirements is something that has come up regularly or frequently in dialogue. And so this is just an opportunity to provide background information and sort of prime the conversation. And essentially to provide EPSB with a comprehensive overview of the statutory and regulatory requirements for student teaching in the state of Kentucky. As you all are probably well aware, from the decision-making standpoint during the pandemic, the EPSB approved waivers allowing experience that a student teacher acquired as an emergency certified substitute teacher to meet the requirements of student teaching and allowing all student teaching observations to be performed remotely for all educator preparation programs. Due to the positive feedback, the EPSB has continued to approve these waivers annually. Additionally, at the July 2023 meeting, the EPSB approved the waiver to allow student teachers to maintain classified employment for the 2023-2024 school year. Staff will be bringing a proposed amendment to the student teaching regulation before the EPSB at a future meeting. This overview is intended to provide the EPSB with an update on the current requirements for student teaching and facilitate conversations regarding changes the EPSB would like to see. And I'm thankful to have Brandon with us today, who has graciously prepared PowerPoint and some slides for us. So welcome, sir.
Thank you. Good morning to the board and Chair Mitchell, and I appreciate you all giving us some time to present some student teaching information to you all. Statute 161.010 subsection 6 defines student teaching as an adult who has completed the prerequisite teacher preparation as prescribed by the accreditation teacher education institution in which he or she is enrolled and who is jointly assigned by the institution at a local school district to engage in a period of practice teaching under the direction and supervision of the administrative and teaching staff of the school district and the institution. It's a very long definition. Next slide. Statute 101 also speaks about that the EPSB board can authorize the cooperative, arrangements between the local boards and our organization for financial arrangements with the colleges and institutions for the purpose of providing professional laboratory experiences and student teaching experiences for students preparing for education, for the education profession. The EPSB board shall create the regulations and definitions and the requirements and general duties of a supervising teacher and the requirements of the local school district and the school to be used for this purpose. Slide, please. The statute also talks about student teaching as a joint agreement between the institution and the local board, and that all student teachers should have the same legal status and protection as a certified teacher employed within the school district. It also states that all student teachers shall be subject to a state and national criminal records check. Next slide. Now we get into the regulation 16 KR 5040. And these couple of bullet points talk about the cooperating teacher requirements. They are to have a valid teaching certificate or license for each grade and subject taught. They're also to have at least 3 years of teaching experience as a certified educator. The teacher who holds a provisional or emergency certificate issued by the EPSB shall not be eligible to serve as a cooperating teacher. 504 also states that. Next slide, please. This information is about the training process for cooperating teachers. There's 3 parts that's defined in the regulation, Part A, Part B, and Part C. A is the basic responsibilities of a cooperating teacher. That goes over what's highlighted in the regulation. Part B is the best practices in supporting the student teacher, which is provided by the EPPs. If it's approved training by the EPSB board. Right now, there's a video that's online that's provided that they watch, and then they reach out to their institution, let them know they have watched that, and the institution checks that off as their training for Part B. That was a video that was put together by several EPPs that was approved by the board. There also is Part C, which is the effective assessment of the student teacher, which is also provided by the EPP. The regulation also talks about a report that has to be submitted that has the candidate and educator preparation institution enrolled student teacher listed, the candidate's assigned school, the cooperating teacher that's assigned to the candidate, the cooperating teacher's area of certification, the cooperating teacher's years of experience, and the number of days that the student teacher will be with the cooperating teacher. Prior to and during student teaching, all candidates shall adhere to the professional code of ethics for the Kentucky school personnel established in 16 KR 1020. Please. So this slide speaks about the 200 hours that's required prior to student teaching. So each candidate is required to have 200 hours of field experience, which many of you may have heard the term KFEDS. It's documented in that application for the EPPs. The EPPs may also use an application that they see fit to record that. They just have to have an electronic documentation of it. But it will, they are required to engage with diverse populations of students, which is usually documented with Infinite Campus. We get Infinite Campus data that will show the breakdowns of the classroom and let us know if they're getting exposure to diverse groups. They also have to have an observation in a school or related agency. They have to do student tutoring. They have to interact with families of students. They have to attend a school board or school-based council meetings. They have to participate in a school-based professional learning community. And they have to have opportunities to assist teachers and other school professionals. Now, the number of hours they have to get in each one of these categories is not determined by EPSB. We'll leave that to the EPPs to give them some freedom in how they develop their program. Next slide, please. As I spoke on KFEDS, that first bullet point just speaks to that the EPP shall maintain an electronic record. As I stated, we offer KFEDS as a free application to the EPPs, but they are allowed to use any application they deem fit to record that information. This ratio for student teachers, cooperating teachers, is 1 to 1. So we try to prevent any overlap of having more than one student. That gives the cooperating teacher the ability to focus on just that one student, and the students not get confused with different cooperating teachers. So we try to keep that ratio to 1. The university supervisor shall conduct a minimum of 4 observations of the student teacher in the actual teaching situation. And requests for remote observations shall be submitted by the EPP and approved by the board if they see that there's a situation which they need more than just the board to observe as a university supervisor. The observation report shall be filed as part of the student teacher record and used as validation of the supervisory function. The university shall be available to work with the student teacher and personnel in the cooperating school regarding any problems that may arise relating to student teaching situations. It's just basically stating that the EPP must be able to help in any issues that may arise in the district that the student is placed. Next slide. This first bullet point speaks on that an EPP must provide this opportunity for their students that have this full range of experience. And then it speaks about that the district and the cooperating teacher, again, must have this collaborative effort to make reasonable efforts to place student teachers in settings that provide the opportunity for them to have these experiences as a student teacher. The student teacher shall be placed in a setting that is, a student teacher shall not be placed in a setting that is not consistent with their planned certification content and grade range. So we kind of restricted to their content area and what grades that they plan to be teaching once they graduated. Next slide, please. So this talks about the waiver process. So sometimes we do get waivers that come in for student teaching. Prior to, they should have a full semester that's a minimum of 70 days of student teaching. And sometimes finding placements that can go that full 70 days in different content areas can be kind of a struggle in some of the districts. So we have a waiver system and process that allows pre-approval of waivers as long as they have submitted documentation of how they have tried to align with the grade levels and the content areas for the student teacher. They get a supportive statement from the principal, and they have a supportive statement from the cooperating teacher, and they showed evidences of the field experiences that the cooperating teacher has had prior to student teaching. So we wanted to kind of expand the process to get on as a consent item to kind of help with the process so that we could pre-approve it and you all could approve it as a consent item. But we do reserve the right at any point to take one of those items and take it before the waiver committee to ask that it be placed on as an action item or a waiver item. This talks about the split placements for cooperating teacher. Any teacher that's getting a primary through 12 certification, it's requested that the teaching be balanced between an elementary and middle school or high school placement, just to get them a exposure to a range of environments, teaching styles, so that they can kind of see how it may vary from elementary to middle school to high school. Candidates pursuing an elementary certificate are requested to have a balanced placement between grade 3 and grades 4 and 5. So we ask that those be split as well. It also states that an institution may use KTIP performance assessment documents. We spoke about that Part C training where they would talk about the assessment provided by the EPSB. They are allowed to use KTIP performance documents to try to help with that assessment. The student teacher shall not have responsibility for the supervision or instruction of P-12 students without direct supervision of a certified educator. It's also defined in these regulations. Next slide, please. So you'll see at the top there, student teachers shall not receive direct compensation for student teaching. It is defined in this regulation that they do not receive compensation. There'll be more on that later. There has been a couple of waivers that have been put in by the board to try to help listen to that. The educator preparation institution shall maintain electronic records that confirm that a student's met the requirements of this section. Again, I spoke about applications. We have a cooperating teacher database online that a lot of the institutions use to document their placements and to also walk through the entire process of getting those signed and also paid out. So next, the compensation of cooperating teachers. Well, we refer to those sometimes as stipends. The EPSB may make arrangements with local school districts to compensate a student teacher or a cooperating teacher. The educator preparation institution must submit their assignments online prior to September 30th and February 1st. We call this locking in their placements. That's just to prevent any misplacements or any missed stipends sent out to the cooperating teachers those dates. Next, please. So if an educator preparation institution fails to report their assignments, then the EPSB is not liable for payment under this administrative regulation. So if they do not put that placement in and lock it in, then we are not liable for producing that payment on that placement. The electronic voucher shall be electronically signed by the cooperating teacher and the university supervisor on or before December 15th or May 1st. This is to give us time to process the payments to send them out. We send them out in the spring at the end of the school year, but this gives us an opportunity to try to get those processed and sent out before the end of our fiscal year, which is in June. If a cooperating teacher fails to provide the complete electronic payment by the date described there, then we are not required to, again, make that payment if they do not sign off on their voucher. This is to ensure that they have checked the information, that they have validated the placement, and that the placement was correct with them. Also for the supervisor to kind of be a second eye to make sure that that placement was done and that it was the right information. All right, next slide. The payment of a cooperating teacher shall be determined based on the funds that's allocated to us in the biennial budget and the total numbers of days served by a cooperating teacher reported for the fiscal year. The payment shall be allocated to the cooperating teacher based upon the number of days the teacher supervises the student teacher, not to exceed 70 days. So we may have some teachers that do a 50-day placement, some do a 35, some do a 70, but they cannot go over that 70 mark. That's the most that we can allocate out as a payment, the 70 days, which is a requirement in the regulation. Payments to cooperating teachers shall be distributed to the school districts or cooperating teachers non-public school on an annual basis and on or before June 30th. Again, that's the end of our fiscal year, and that's when we try to get those out to the districts at the end of the school year. And that is put onto their paychecks within their districts if they're a public teacher. If they're a non-public, then it is sent directly to them. So as we spoke, there's been some board actions to try to help with the cooperating teacher and to try to help with some staffing issues we may have seen in the districts. So we had the emergency substitute action that was presented by the board that allowed experienced student teachers to require an emergency certified substitute teacher certification. And this allows them to serve as a sub for their districts and frees up the districts to use somebody that has a little bit more experience in educator preparation program. And it allows the district to compensate them while they're serving as a substitute teacher. And it allows that student teacher to use that experience as a sub for their student teaching. So it really is a collaboration between the EPP and the local district to make sure that the district's being used as the EPP sees fit for their student teacher. And that the district has agreed to use a teacher that is okay with the EPP. When they come to that agreement, then they will go forward with the placement. They will be assigned a cooperating teacher in the building so that they do have somebody that they can go to if they have any issues as a substitute. That individual is compensated because they are serving as a cooperating teacher. And it really provides a great opportunity for the districts to kind of put someone in the classroom that has some experience and to kind of get a feel for how that student may perform once they graduate. And so it is a great experience for both the EPP and the districts. The board has also allowed classified employees to maintain their staff position and receive compensation if they were serving as a student teacher in the same school. And so that's also freed them up to be able to do their student teaching and also receive compensation while in the same school. They've also opened up the remote student teaching. We saw, especially during the COVID years, we saw that education was changing a little bit. There was some remote teaching going on, and to kind of get ahead of the game, I think the board made an action to try to help with remote teaching, which we've seen used, especially during the COVID era, in which a student can watch a cooperating teacher on Google Classroom, can engage with different activities online, and have that be accepted for some student teaching requirements. If there's an abundance of remote student teaching, we have seen institutions submit a waiver just to have that approved by the board as an alternative placement. And we've seen a lot of great programs and designs around teaching as well. Next slide, please. So some common waivers that we see is you may have a strong candidate or cooperating teacher that might have less than 3 years, the required 3 years. So they may have 2.5 years, but they are recommended by their district as being, a great leader, a phenomenal teacher, that they really feel a student teacher will benefit from. The EPP will also agree and think that this is definitely a teacher that they would like to place their student with. And so we do see those waivers where they request that the board may waive that half a year that they, or year that they may not have with that required 3 years. We do see waivers for the balance of placements for student teacher candidates because some content areas can be very difficult to place in the elementary, middle school, and high school setting, especially foreign language. Sometimes you don't see a whole lot of foreign language at the elementary level, but you do see it at the middle and high school. And so EVPs will request that their entire 70 days be placed in one of those content areas. We've also seen a waiver for balance between the K-12 candidates when trying to find qualified and willing teachers. Sometimes in some of the districts, you might have teachers that fill all the content areas, but you may have a very young teacher base. So you might not find many teachers that fit that 3-year requirement, but they have them placed with one phenomenal high school teacher or elementary teacher that does meet that 3-year, and they just want to complete their 70 days within that district with that teacher. Student teachers may not sometimes meet the 70 full days. There may be things like school closures, weather closures, illness in the areas. We saw a lot of that during COVID, and some personal emergencies that may come up that may limit the student teacher's ability to be in the classroom. We see EVPs really kind of supplement that with additional content, and they will submit a waiver explaining all of the situation, why the student teacher didn't meet the 70 days, and how they've tried to help the student teacher to really kind of close up some of those gaps in the 70 full days. So that's all that I have to present on student teaching. Is there any questions that the board may have? I know this is a very quick overview.
I wanted to ask a question on the learning fee buses to action. So first of all, I love it. I personally used it. I've had great teachers with me club when I've been out. And I hate to bring this up because I also think it's a great way to receive pay. So it's very hard to work while student teaching. So I love that we're able to find ways, creative ways to help offset some of the financial losses some of our student teachers are facing by choosing to be a teacher. However, I am wondering if there's any kind of provision in there about, let's say that you have a 50-day placement. If you spend 48 of those days subbing, it is really, really hard to you're missing out on a valuable experience of being in the classroom with a teacher that can help redirect, or you can see relationships get built from start to finish. If you spend the majority of the time in a classroom by yourself subbing, and subbing is a great experience as someone who's had to sub a lot and is invaluable as well. Just knowing how to go into any room and have to own it and dive in. But I do worry that we have student teachers missing out on valuable experience. So I'm curious if there's a possibility, if we would, I'm just proposing, I'm kind of thinking out loud, if there's any way that we could add some kind of provision that had a maximum amount of days of subbing.
What I can speak to is that many of the EPPs do have the freedom to decide what they will allow and the number of days that they will allow as student teaching. They can tell their student that now we're only going to allow you to do 35 days, and the other 35 days have to be traditional student teaching. They do have that right to do that. As far as the board taking action, Cassie can speak.
So at this time, the allowance of substitute teaching as to count towards student teaching is simply a waiver of regulation. This board does have the ability to amend the regulation. Unfortunately, you can't amend statute. You have to go through the legislature to do that. But one of the reasons for this presentation today is that ultimately we do need to make some amendments to the regulation based on the actions that this board has taken. So it is possible to explore an amendment to that. I will note that there is currently not the way that it is still right for to allow that decision to be made at the district level for those two to work together to decide what is going to work best for the student teachers. Not to put Dr. Lingo on the spot here, but I'm going to. As an institution, they may be able to teach that a little bit too about how that's worked in practice. Back on that.
So, and just know that we take it very seriously, right? I mean, and so when a student teacher has the opportunity to be a substitute, then obviously we make sure that that student will be successful in that substitute experience. I will note that our candidates at all EPPs receive feedback around teaching and around building relationships, teaching lessons before student teaching. You know, they've already been there for 200 hours before they can even student teach. So they have received lots of feedback prior to student teaching. And typically it is in an emergency situation as to why when they are substitute teaching.
Well, I'll just add to some of those. In addition to that pre-student teaching experience, I think the institutions and districts have an opportunity to thrive in spaces where they can be flexible. And so we have some models where there is progressive supervision, the idea, or reductionist supervision. The idea that you start with a great deal of check-ins and then over time, but that's also consistent with the expectations of student teaching and the student teacher itself. As they are moving forward, they're becoming more and more independent. These are candidates who have identified as already having the likelihood of independence within the structure. There's going to be weekly check-ins, assigned mentor, those sorts of things. And if there is not growth, then we actually do pull them out. And so there is push into the model and there is push out of the model. And it really is in its current iteration, an opportunity for districts and universities to work together. I worry when we put additional restrictions in there because what Chip can tell, because what can happen is people will start to rely on it and say, well, I can do this up to 30 days. And that's what the regulation says. So when we start to put more details in that and take away that flexibility, we get to a point where people are using the regulation in a way that it's not really meant to be used. It's meant to be used to build a partnership and a conversation around the growth of that particular student teacher. So totally get that it needs to be highly monitored, and it really is, because we want it to be an opportunity. We don't want it to be impact their second, third, fourth year. We want them to retain, and that's the biggest goal, and everybody shares that goal. So.
Thank you for that clarification too. So I just want to make sure that when someone comes in that first year and they're totally in it, they feel as prepared as possible.
I'll just sort of play off what Sarah said, because I could be wrong. I thought when we first set up this waiver, it was as we were trying to help with the number of people in the building. And yes, someone who has gone through undergrad program is going through more education than another option route. So I get that, and that's great. But I also do think that there is importance of student teaching. And I guess my fear is when it becomes not just subbing. I'm okay with the subbing here and there. It's the long-term sub hired for a whole semester. And then my fear becomes, how much mentoring are they really receiving at that level? That's where I guess I'm cautious about the waiver. I get the not putting the days portion, but I do think if we agree that student teaching is still really important, what is important about it? And I would say that I think it is that mentoring and working with a master teacher to really hone in on that tack of being in the classroom, seeing the relationships being built, your procedures, your policies, the expectations, and how that works. And I think that is something that can easily be missed if we're subbing long-term, or if we're subbing not long-term, but for the full amount of time in your one classroom for a couple of days and another classroom. That consistency may not be there. So that's my hesitancy of, is the long-term subbing, not necessarily subbing in general.
And I'll just say in that case, Justin, that's where the EPP really needs to step up and provide that mentoring and that support, so that if they are not with a cooperating teacher, then that university supervisor needs to be in there more, providing that feedback and so forth. So I still think that, this is the flexibility, because what we don't want is the district to be in a situation where they have someone that has the content knowledge, has the teaching skills, and not being able to utilize that for student learning. So,
Sorry, I was gonna say at the middle school level, from what I've seen, because we've had a long-term sub in there, they were still responsible for going to their other content area and working with that master teacher as well. So it wasn't, and there again, there's 2 certifications at the middle school level, but still, I think I prefer the long-term sub versus the piecemeal here and there, popping in, because you've got to have those classroom routines and those relationships built to be a long-term sub. So, from the middle school perspective, at least they still do have that opportunity to work with that master teacher in the other content area.
When we've seen some creative situations that you all wouldn't have seen unless you're digging it, right? So we've seen people who have actually done year-long student teaching, but done it half the day because of circumstances related to content, certification areas. We've seen people use winter or summer opportunities in the same way. And so what happens a lot of times is we're actually using all of these regulations simultaneously, or all of these guidelines, frameworks simultaneously to really find the best placement for the student teacher, but also for the district. And I think, Justin, your point is well made earlier in that we did start down this road because we were having districts who had, to your point, Amy, really qualified folks who were sitting on the sideline, not being able to be utilized in a way. And we were relying then on emergency certifications, people straight out, people who had no classroom management, who had no 200 hours of field. They were just walking in day one. And so the idea here is, how do we find a balance between placing a really well prepped student teacher to make best use of them for the kids in the classrooms in the districts, at the same time of dealing with the people shortage. And so that's why I think you hear probably echoes from Amy and I around flexibility and district partnership. I think these conversations actually have made our district partnership stronger because we are actively having conversations with principals. And I think, Amber, your point earlier, what do they really need and how are our students really doing in those classrooms? So.
What I'm hearing here, just to make sure I'm summarizing this appropriately, is you do want the flexibility that it offers. You want them to be able to continue to double moving, but this continue to bring one guidance in that period to be very positive feedback regarding this action. But where right now it's just a waiver, and it's that language is very vague. If you're putting it back into the regulation, you're making that permanent, where you don't have to do a waiver every year. Yes, they can do this, but clarifying that they do still need to meet those requirements of the mentoring, of the observation, having that cooperating teacher. And so we can work on that language for you as we're moving this. In the presentation we bring for you, there's been 3 ones with waivers that have continued. Well, I guess the classified employment has just started this year, but the remote student teaching observations and the emergency sub waiver, those can continue. Being with the remote student teaching, the way that it's written into the regulations, it's a little odd. It states that the institutions can perform these observations remotely, but they have to request the permission to do so. There's not really a standard by which you would review those. So it seems a little burdensome to have them submit those requests and you review them and approve them. So we can just remove that requirement to allow them to do remote student teaching observations.
I have a question about that. Will that remove
if we remove that, then they could do all of that remote, or would there still be a requirement for them to be in the classroom directly with at least a few occasions?
You know, we can, it's your regulation. You all have the ability to put that however you would like. I think what we've seen since COVID is that remote student teaching observations have really taken off. We're seeing a lot more of those, that they have the ability to do that. Because when we're saying remote, we're saying not necessarily it's recorded and sent to them. It's like they're in the classroom, just without being in the classroom. But that is something we can explore based on board feedback. They probably need to really like to do that.
Speaking real quick on the remote observation, we did see an instance where an EPP submitted a waiver request for an alternative placement in which the student had some medical issues arise, and they were able to use those remote observations as a way to supplement the rest of their student teaching. So it was beneficial in their case.
It would be interesting to see what our peer rural serving states are also doing in this respect. So maybe if we could get some benchmarking on what some other states are doing. I think we have a challenge. Every state has this challenge to a certain extent, but we have such extreme differences in access to supervisors, to the schools themselves physically. And so there's a lot of, I don't know, you know, if you're going to live 2 hours from a student teacher supervisor, then that makes a lot of sense, right? And there's not a ton of physics trained people who I want to be student teachers, supervisors in some of our service areas. But at the same time, if you are living up 2 blocks away from the school, I would want you to be in the school. So, so there's some context there that maybe we can learn from our peers.
Nothing work at it. It's a numbers game too. Just you know, quality being the essential, but just numbers and yeah, the distance is a real factor. Just because there's only so many hours, right?
Yeah.
So many individuals that may be available.
I don't think shrinking Commonwealth is on the table.
Not those are in the movies.
Any other questions or discussion? Thank you all. Next, we have action items. These items are presented to the board for action and will require a motion and a vote. Action item A is presented by Cassie Truewater.
So picture
How do you like there?
So action item A, which is found on page 92 of your agenda book. Oh, computer, well, we can. We do have the login information for you here. Well, I'm getting locked back into that. I will give you the general overview of what this is. This is action item A on the agenda book, and it does start on page 92. And what this is doing, this is the ongoing regulation review that you see from me every year, where we bring before you the regulations that are set to expire. Because the way that the administrative regulation process works now is that regulations are in effect for 7 years. And if no action is taken on them within those 7 years, they will expire. However, there's a process that you can either certify that the regulation is something that you want to keep in effect and it will continue for another 7 years. You can certify that it is something that needs to be amended, and then you have to file an amendment within 18 months. If a regulation is set to be amended, those amendments will come back before you. You will see and have to approve those amendments before they are tried. If we have it listed as certified, then it will remain in effect. There are 6 regulations that are set to expire this school year. Those are included in the materials for you with the recommended actions. And if there are any questions on that or the process, I'm happy to answer those. Otherwise, if you would like to approve that, you just make a motion to approve the expiring regulation.
Thank you. Is everybody able to get in? Make sure. All right. Well, then I will need a motion at this
Okay,
time.
I'll make a motion to approve the certification of expiring regulation.
Thank you, Captain Zinsky. Do I have seconds?
Jacqueline Nathan, second.
Thank you, Ms. Mayfield. The motion before the board is to approve the expiring regulations. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. And next we have action item B. Over assessment prerequisites.
Good morning. Good morning. This one we brought to you back in June, I believe, for the first read. And this is for the Office of Career and Technical Education. Their proposed revisions to the current CTE assessment order. There's several of them. I'm not going to go through and read all of them for you, but so these are the changes that they're going to make. We do have a lady here, Beth, from OCTE. If you have any specific questions on these assessments, she'll be happy to answer those.
And these were the ones that were before you and here.
Yeah. And there's been no changes.
Thank you. And I would need a motion.
I just want to clarify, since we have a CTE representative in the room, this is something that CTE teachers have asked for, correct? Or have been involved in a further conversation.
Recommendations are actually made by the program consultant B teams, which are business and industry representatives, to keep each program area current with current industry standards. So it is coming from business and industry.
Okay, I just wanted to double check just because I always like when that question is asked by people who aren't in my position or field. So not being a CTE teacher, I is a little like out of my league. So I just want to make sure the right people were involved in a part of the conversation. It's something that you guys are wanting as a career. I don't want to make a decision for someone that could potentially harm them if they're not asking for it. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion before we have a motion? Yeah.
So I am from CTE and I've been reading over everything. And the recommendations are for initial certification in the event they do not meet the educational.
That is correct.
So not in addition to, so if they have a degree or associate in their field. Perfect. Okay, that's all I have.
Any other discussion before we have a motion? All right, at this time, can I get a motion?
Motion to approve action on these.
Sweet.
Second that.
And Captain Rosinski, the motion before the board is to approve the assessment prerequisites for occupation-based career and technical education certification. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. Thank you all. The board is now ready to review waiver request KRS 1610281N provides that the board has the authority to waive its administrative regulations when a request is submitted by an applicant for certification, a post-secondary institution, or a superintendent of a local school district. When requesting a waiver, the requesting party must submit to the board a written request along with appropriate justification for the waiver. EPSB staff reviewed the waivers of EPSB's waiver committee during an open meeting immediately prior to this meeting, and waiver committee formulated recommendations. Brandon Harrod and Sharon Salzman will present the waiver request for the full board, and waiver committee chair Kathy Gunn will present the committee's recommendation for final action. Starting with waiver A, presented by Brandon.
Thank you, Chair Mitchell. Hello again to the board. So waiver A was actually pulled back from the institution due to the request being after the agenda was printed. It was not removed from the agenda, but they have requested that waiver be pulled.
So no action will be needed on this time for letter A. Moving to waiver B.
Waiver B is to waive the 10-year recency requirement for admissions assessment for Christy Johnson. This was submitted on behalf of EKU, and she is a candidate for admission into the Option 9 program, and EKU requests the waiver as it relates to her expired ACT English exam. She took the English ACT in 1994. When she realized her English and reading scores were outside the 10-year recency, she did go and take the case writing on the 28th, but had technology issues when she was trying to take that test. She passed the case reading, and she is scheduled to retake the case writing on August 8th, but that didn't give them time before school started to get the scores. So we still haven't got them yet, but they are requesting to waive the 10-year recency requirement and to admit Ms. Johnson into the program based on her previous ACT English scores.
Thank you. And Ms. Gunn, what was the recommendation?
The waiver committee reviewed the waiver request submitted by Eastern Kentucky University. The committee found exceptional circumstances justifying the waiver. Therefore, the committee recommends that the EPSB grant the waiver.
All right, at this time, I will need a motion.
I make a motion to approve the waiver.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Berry. The motion before the board is to grant waiver of the 10-year recency requirement for admission assessment for Christy Johnson. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. Moving on to waiver C.
The waiver C is to request to waive the emergency substitute certificate requirements for Gallatin County. They have been unsuccessful in finding qualified teachers. This applicant intends to complete the bachelor's degree as soon as possible, which will eliminate the need for the 2.5 GPA, and hopes to eventually pursue an Option 6 program. This applicant has earned 111 credit hours, but does not hold the required GPA. The results is she's been trying to complete coursework while holding a full-time job and caring for an extremely high needs child. So the district is requesting that EPSB waive the required GPA and issue an emergency substitute certificate.
Thank you. And Ms. Gunn, the recommendation.
The waiver committee reviewed the waiver request submitted by Gallatin County Schools. The committee found exceptional circumstances justifying the waiver. Therefore, the committee recommends that EPSB grant the waiver.
Thank you, Ms. Gunn. Do I have a motion?
Make a motion to approve the waiver.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Snell. The motion before the board is to approve the request to waive emergency substitute certificate requirement for Gallatin County Schools. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. The motion passes. Moving on to waiver D.
So this is a request to waive emergency certificate requirements for Montgomery County. They have been unsuccessful in finding qualified teachers for an LBD position. This applicant is interested in pursuing the Option 6 program for LBD certification and is enrolling in graduate courses to raise the GPA for admission into the program. The district is requesting that the EPSB waive the required GPA, issue an emergency certificate for this candidate while they work to meet the admission requirements for an Option 6 program.
Thank you, Ms. Gunn.
The waiver committee reviewed the waiver request. The committee found exceptional circumstances justifying the waiver. Therefore, the committee recommends that EPSB grant the waiver.
Thank you, Ms. Gunn. Is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve the waiver.
Captain Rosinski, is there a second? Thank you, Dr. Lingo. The motion before the board is to approve the request to waive emergency certificate requirement for Montgomery County Schools. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. And the motion passes. Next to waiver E.
So Zach Whitehead has submitted this waiver to request renewal of his provisional certificate for school counselor to complete the additional coursework needed for issuance of the standard certificate for school counselor. He stated he received misinformation, which resulted in not completing all the required coursework.
He has attempted to apply to several graduate programs, but only found two that offers what he needs. One was already full and the other one was in person, which was not feasible with his current position. So Mr. Whitehead is requesting that EPSB waive the required coursework, renew his professional certificate for school counselor, so he can complete the required coursework for issuance of the standard certificate.
Thank you, Ms. Gunn.
The waiver committee reviewed the waiver request submitted by the applicant. The committee found exceptional circumstances justifying the waiver. Therefore, the committee recommends that EPSB grant the waiver.
Thank you, Ms. Gunn. This time we'll get a motion. Sweet, is there a second?
Dr. Mayfield, second.
Thank you, Ms. Mayfield. The motion before the board is to approve the request to waive the renewal requirements for provisional certificates for school counselor or Zach Whitehead. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay, and the motion passes. Thank you. That was really quick of all of our waivers. So we are now to the point where I'll open the floor for any board member or board comments. Does anyone wish to make any comments at this time?
I have one today. Since this is our, I believe, our last meeting with Commissioner Glass as our commissioner, I just wanted to extend our appreciation to him for his service as a commissioner. I hate he can't be here, but Dr. Darnell, please pass on our gratitude to him for leading us through some difficult times over the past several years and for his service.
Thank you for that.
I would also like to echo what Dr. Darnell said about OELE and their certification process. It is very, very, very nice to know on the school side that there are people that are so responsive to individual circumstances. And every time we had a special request, they stepped up and met those requests for us. And I just want to recognize them publicly. Thank you.
Absolutely. Any other board comments?
I just have a question. So certainly appreciate that in July we had the emergency meeting to be able to get things sorted for this upcoming school year. Do we anticipate that maybe next year we should do that as a matter of practice of actually scheduling a July board meeting so that we can help our districts prep ahead of time? Or is that already on the table, or is that a violating some regulation I don't know about?
Are you trying? So the board does have a regular meeting schedule that currently does not include July. However, you have the ability to do a special call meeting at any time, just as long as you're complying with the notice requirements of the Open Act. We can absolutely look at continuing that July meeting, whether it's through the special call meeting process to account for everyone's summer schedules, or if it is updating the regular meeting schedule to include a July. I'm sort of advocating to replace the August, but it's okay.
I second that as a back to school. I mean, this is only our fourth day in school. I would really like to look at changing our meeting schedule so that the meeting was maybe July, September or something instead of August. It's tough.
So we can absolutely look at the regular meeting schedule right now and see if, based on that change too, if it changed July, how do you want that to occur all around? We want to look at different months in general. So we will talk with our legal staff as well, because, you know, with the case, as well, the person that we will educator cases, there will be some implications with that. But we can bring this back as a discussion item at a meeting to get some full feedback. And once you have some time to think about this, I'll provide you with a copy of the current meeting schedule. Everyone look at it. We'll do a discussion in October and then potentially action in December. So that could give plenty of notice in case you change your schedule. Great.
Well, that's a good idea for a lot of our board, but regardless, I do think us doing or having the July meeting to get all of those waivers in is beneficial for the district. So I do think that should probably continue. Personal thoughts, maybe we shift that to we'll see. Thank you for bringing that up. Any other questions, comments, discussion? All right. At this time, I believe we're ready to go into closed session pursuant to KRS 618101C and J to conduct a character and fitness review and review potential actions relating to complaints and reports. At this time, I will need a motion to go into closed session.
I make a motion to go into closed session.
Thank you, Ms. Snell. Do I have a second? The motion before the board is to go into closed session. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay, and the motion passes. Thank you. We are now back in open session, and at this time, we will vote on those items discussed during closed session. For character and fitness, 1, deny, 2 through 9, approve, 10, defer, 11 through 21, approve. For CA4 online character and fitness, 1, deny, 2 through 15, approve, 16, defer, 17, deny. For agreed orders, 1 through 37, we accept. 4, findings of facts, conclusions of law, recommended order, and appeal rights, 1 and 2, we accept. On findings of facts, conclusions of law, we accept, and we accept on recommended orders for 1 and 2. For motions to reconsider for case 1, we deny. And for educator cases, 1, dismiss without prejudice. 2, defer for training, PDIS training. 3, dismiss with prejudice. 4, dismiss without prejudice. 5, attorney review. 6, defer for training, classroom management and de-escalation training. 7 through 27, attorney review. 28, admonish. 29 through 45, attorney review. 46, defer for training, duty to report training. 47, dismiss with prejudice. 48 and 49, attorney review. 50, defer for training, educator ethics training. 51 and 52, attorney review. 53, defer for training, educator ethics training. 54 through 58, attorney review. 59 through 63, admonish. 64, dismiss with prejudice. 65 and 66, admonish. 67, defer for training, classroom management training. 68, attorney review. 69, 70, and 71, dismiss with prejudice. 72 and 73, defer for training, admin code training. 74 and 75, dismiss with prejudice. 76, defer for training, admin code training. 77, dismiss with prejudice. 78, defer for training, admin code training. 79 through 82, refer to hearing. 83 through 85, dismiss with prejudice. 86 through 98, admonish, and 99 through 107, dismiss with prejudice. At this time, we will go around and vote on how we agree with the board's decision.
Agreed orders number 2 and 37.
CJ Fryer, agree on all.
Please agree to all.
Kathy Gunn, recuse on agreed order 2 and agree on all others.
Elijah Edwards, recuse on motion to reconsider number 1, recuse on educator case number 15, agree on all others.
Priscilla Keller, agree on all.
Corinne Murphy, recuse on agreed order 22A and agree on the remainder.
Amy Lingo, agree on all. Amanda Ellis, agree to all.
Diane Berry, agree on all.
Meredith Pittman, recused on motion to reconsider number 1, approve all.
Amber Snell, agree to all.
Justin Mitchell, agree to all. All right, at this time, I will need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Ellis, I think. And the second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Snell. The motion before the board is to adjourn. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
opposed say nay. And we are now adjourned. Thank you all.